Good morning. I have the wonderful, just kidding. Messing up already. I have the wonderful opportunity of being able to speak this morning with my wonderful husband. Aren't y'all excited? Yeah. But I'm just excited for this Sunday because this is a really special Sunday for all of us. As Ed and Caleb mentioned, today is Commitment Sunday. It's a Sunday where we get to really look at what is God doing in our church, what is he calling us to, especially as we look at the year 2021. Now, there's a lot of people who previously in 2020 had all of these amazing words to give for 2020, and now everyone's scared to say anything about 2021. But I want to say that we are not people who are afraid. We are not intimidated. We are not like hiding back in fear. We are marching forward in faith, and we are excited. I don't know if he's going to be mad at me for this, but everyone, say hi to Pastor Dave. He has been so faithfully and wonderfully taking care of my mom, and I think it's the longest you've ever been without being to church, the last 3 or 4 weeks. So we're glad that you're here with us this morning. So anyway, back to Commitment Sunday. So as Caleb and Ed spoke about, we have so many different ways that you can engage in this church. And today we'll be talking about how you can give a financial pledge. But really, we also just want to talk about, you know what? There's so many ways that you can get involved and you can serve at Limitless. When COVID happened, everything fell apart, like our ushers, our welcome team, our setup, all of that, just kind of, we didn't even know how to make it happen, but we figured out ways to make it happen. So we want to encourage you, text that word serve, text in, and we will contact you this week. We'll talk to you about what is it that you would want to do. Nothing that's going to be too overwhelming for you, something that'll give you just a sense of passion. You know what? Our friend Seth spoke to us about how, you know what, people can start to think that in the church, just setting out something or cleaning up is not that big of a deal. But the reality is that every single thing that we do helps to make this a place that feels safe and loving and comfortable for anybody in our community to come. And that is so vital and so important. And so any way that you serve, not only is it working towards the things that God is doing in our church, and we believe in the ways that he wants to bless our community, but also you are going to be rewarded in heaven for all of the effort that you give. So that's my little spiel. But today we're going to be talking about zeal. We started last week talking about zeal, and the word zeal, it just means passion. It means, I'll actually read to you the definition again that's inside of your bulletin or on your screen, but it means great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective, fervor for a person, cause, or object, eager desire or endeavor, enthusiastic diligence or ardor. I love that word. I love the passion behind that word that means passion. And so we spoke last week about the passion of actually Paul, the Apostle Paul. But one of the things that I mentioned was that King David spoke about zeal for your house, God, consumes me. Zeal, I have so much passion for your house. And that's such an important thing that David said that Jesus actually ends up quoting him. And Jesus says the same thing, is that he had zeal, he had passion for his Father's house. And we too can have passion for our Father's house. But Cody and I started talking a lot about this last week. And we spoke about how David and how he really had zeal from the moment that you meet him in the Word. Right? He had so much passion, and his passion started out when he was a teenager working in the fields, taking care of his father's sheep. And what ends up happening is Samuel ends up coming, and Samuel is a prophet, and he is told by God, I need you to go and anoint the next king of Israel. And so he gets told, go to the house of Jesse, but he doesn't know who he's going to anoint. And he says, God says to him, I'll tell you when you get there. So he goes through all of David's older brothers, and they're all strong and strapping men. And he says, no, that's not the one. No, that's not the one. And so eventually we're going to pick up in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 11 and 12. And it says, so he asked Jesse, Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one. This is the one." And right away we see David's zeal. He just comes onto the scene and right away starts to make an impact. David caught the attention of God because of his zeal. But what's so interesting is, where did that zeal and passion come from? He was just a kid out in a field. But that zeal came from the intimacy that he had with God out in that field. See, zeal comes from being intimate with the God who is zealous. We spoke last week about how zealous God is, how passionate he is. Right? When we spend time with the God who is so full of passion, he's the most creative. He is the most fun. He's the most exciting. He has the best ideas. And when we spend time with that God, that zeal rubs off on us. My dad often speaks about the rub-off effect. He always spent time with his mentor, Trevor. And he said there wasn't very often times where they would, sometimes they would sit down and have long conversations, but most of the time they were just doing life together. They were just serving together, just in ministry together. And he said the rub-off is what he really learned the most from, is just being up next to somebody, rubbing shoulders with somebody, and what they have, you end up picking up. And that's really what it's all about, is that David, he spent time with God out in the field when he was alone. And from that, he got so much zeal, so much passion.
Can you guys hear me? Check. All right. So that first point, zeal is found in intimacy. It's so true. No? Okay. Let's use this. Check. Okay. So zeal is found in intimacy. Tirsha was saying that, that rub-off effect, and you read in Proverbs, it says that bad company corrupts good character, right? The opposite is true. When you're hanging out with Jesus, you become more like Jesus. So zeal is found in intimacy. It's found in that quiet place. It's found in that place where nobody else is but just you and God. It's so important. And sometimes we can make excuses, right? I know I have. I don't have time for that. I don't have time to spend time with God or make that quiet place or that secret place, because I got 4 kids. I got all this stuff going on. We could come up with all sorts of excuses, and it just reminds me of Enoch in the Bible. If you read in Genesis 5, there's actually a genealogy, and it kind of reads through, and this is the son of who, and all the way down. And you're kind of your eyes glaze over, but it kind of takes a little pause when it comes to Enoch. It actually says, Enoch walked faithfully with God, then he was no more because God took him away. And it's kind of an interesting thing that the writer would choose to say that. It's why would he say that? And it's interesting because you see that before that, Enoch had all these children. So it's even though he had all these children, he had all these responsibilities that didn't get in the way of him having such a close relationship with God that God actually just took him. He didn't taste death. God just took him away. So that's pretty crazy. We come to David. He's a teenager. He's out in the field. You could imagine, most teenagers, if you would do that to them, they would just forever hate you. You're putting me on the field with the sheep. What's wrong with you? I should be doing the other things my brothers are doing. But the crazy thing is, he could have gotten really bitter. He could have gotten really frustrated. But it seems that he actually uses that time wisely. So whatever lifestyle you have, whatever it looks like, your work schedule, kids, family, whatever, make time for that quiet place, because that zeal comes from intimacy with God. Yeah. So, David was anointed as a teen, but he was appointed as an adult. So even when you're out in that quiet time and you're feeling like this is not worth my time, nothing's happening, just keep in mind that what happened to David. He was anointed as a teenager, but appointed as an adult. So your time is coming. So if you feel nothing's happening, things are slow right now, I'm feeling nothing's coming of this, your time is coming. See, David's zeal in the field gave him the courage to face Goliath. Think about that for a second. The zeal that he attained in the wilderness with the sheep is what gave him the courage to face Goliath.
Yeah, so like Cody said, David was only appointed, right? It took a long time. he's a teenager, and he comes and he's told, you're going to be the king. Like, imagine how that would feel as a teenager. You're just out there totally bored in the field, but actually he's not bored because he's making the best of his time. But he gets told, you're going to be king, but it's many, many years, and he goes through all kinds of crazy trials. If you haven't read the story of David, you should totally read it, because he ends up, the current king, Saul, first loves him, then hates him, then tries to kill him, and then, sends the whole army of Israel after him, and David's on the run, and it's just crazy. But all the time, David has such zeal and has such intimacy and passion with God. And so he gets appointed finally as the king after King Saul dies, and he ends up, when this happens, when everything's kind of in order and he's finally the king of Israel, the first thing he does is he goes and he gets the Ark of the Covenant back. Now that's at the time the place where God chose to dwell. It's a place of God's presence, was the Ark of the Covenant. And so that's the first thing David does, because the Ark had been stolen. And so he goes and he gets it back, and he brings the Ark back, and there's this whole procession. We won't get into all that, but there's all this craziness that happens as David brings the Ark back into Jerusalem. And so he ends up, he's so excited about this. He's so passionate about it that David, the king of Israel, like, he should be just totally respectable and honorable, but instead, what is he doing as they're bringing the ark back in? He's in the front, and he's dancing half naked. Like, just so much passion. He's so excited. He's just like stripping down. I don't know why, but that's apparently what happens to him when he gets excited. But he's just dancing and having the best time of his life. But his wife, one of his wives, Michal, ends up getting totally embarrassed. And she's like, David, what are you doing? You are the king of Israel. Why are you dancing like that? You should be so embarrassed. Even the slave girls, even the servants were out there, and they're looking at you, and what on earth must they be thinking right now? Right? She's going like, what are you doing? Why are you acting like this? But this is what David responds. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 22 says, he first talks about how, God chose me as king. And then he says, and I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. You see, David is going, I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I don't care. I am just so passionate for God. And that's point number 2, is that zeal is revealed in influence. So the first one is zeal is found in intimacy, in our alone time with God. But our passion is revealed in front of people. It's revealed in the places where we have influence. All of us, all of you, every single one of you has influence. You have a sphere of influence in your life. Whether it's your family, whether it's people you work with, whether it's your community, whether it's just people at the grocery store, you have a sphere of influence, and you get to decide how you're going to use that influence. How is your zeal going to be revealed? And with David, he's going, you know what, Michal? Those slave girls are going to hold me in honor because I set an example for them today. I set an example of the fact that our God is worth being zealous for. Our God is worth being passionate about. David didn't care at all what people thought. He cared only what God thought. And that's exactly why he was able to go and defeat Goliath, right? He was able to go and defeat Goliath because he trusted in God. He had spent that time in intimacy in the field, and so that meant that he was able to go and trust God. He was able to trust God when it came time to defeat Goliath. All of us have influence, but it's really interesting as we look at people worshiping, as we think about worship. So many of us can get so intimidated by worshiping God. You know, we've been on a number of missions trips, and man, people in Africa and in some other country, they just like let loose when they're worshiping. But I feel like we have kind of turned our worship into westernized worship, where we're just very We're so nervous of what people think about us. But the reality is that passionate worship looks like foolishness to those who lack passion. Right? And so sometimes when you look at people who are just dancing and praising God, there might be something in you that wells up and is like, I want to be like that. Be like that. You can be like that, right? You can have that kind of passion. We can all push past all of the concern about our reputation, what people think about us, and we could be like David, and we can have that zeal. But so often we can get critical of other people who are passionate when we're struggling to have that passion ourselves. And so I know I've felt that so many times. I'll look at other people and be like, whoa, calm down, everybody. Do you guys see that meme? I should have gotten it, but that like video that was going around of the lady who was in the choir, and she says like, everybody tells you to not act extra, and then this is me, and she is like going off and dancing. I'll have to send it out. Anyway, she's going off and dancing, and that's how we need to be. We just need to have zeal for our amazing God.
So worship's going to be pretty lit today, right? That's a youth term, lit. Yeah, anyways, okay. All right. So we're going to take a little detour here because we need to understand something. At this point in history where we're reading about David and his passion and his zeal, we have to understand at what point in the story he is with God. You see, we've talked about this several times before, but God actually, throughout Scripture, he relates to people through covenants. And why is that? Because he meets people where they're at. So there's two main covenants that you kind of read about in the Bible, and that's the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. So the Old Covenant was all about the law, right? It was Moses. He took the Israelites out of Egypt, took them through the wilderness, took them to Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments. It's all about, he gets the rules for the people. But I don't know if you remember, we've spoken about this before. God actually first offers them a face-to-face relationship. He offers them the opportunity to be a nation of priests. And what does that mean? What does a priest do? A priest goes into the presence of God. So he was actually offering everyone in the nation of Israel his presence, a face-to-face relationship. But you read in Exodus, and you see that, the people are actually so scared. They're like, no. We're not going to do that. God, you're terrifying. You talk to Moses, and he'll talk to us. He'll be the mediator. Just give us the rules. So God, he's concerned about relationships. So he doesn't just say, no, that's not what I want. You just go your own way. He's like, okay, well, a little bit of relationship is better than no relationship. So here are the rules. So they get the rules, and they set up this system, and the priests, they get to go into the presence of God, one time a year. It's just crazy. So they give that up. And obviously, then we get to the new covenant where Jesus comes. And then now we have that opportunity again to get into the presence of God. We can meet God face to face in this new covenant because of what Jesus did. And the crazy thing is we can't mess that covenant up because it's not between us and God anymore. It's between the Son and the Father. And we get to be part of it through Jesus. I mean, how crazy is that? That's the gospel right there. It's like we don't have to hold up this crazy list of rules, and if we don't hold it up, we're cursed. It's like, no, Jesus actually took that all on himself, and now we just get to be part of his righteousness. We become the righteousness of Christ. So that's crazy. It's amazing. Okay, so back to David. So where is David living in this whole thing? He's actually living smack dab in the old covenant. He's living smack dab in the blessings or curses. You do good things, I'm going to bless you. If you mess up, it's curses. That's just the way it was. It's really interesting if you actually research it. Anyway, so he's smack dab in this old covenant, yet he's able to reach into the new covenant and pull new covenant realities into the old covenant. See, I kind of thought about that. I'm like, what would that be like? And it's kind of like I thought, well, okay, I've got this guitar hanging on my wall, right? And then sometimes I'm downstairs and I hear someone messing with it. I'm like, hey, don't touch the guitar. Stop it. Sometimes the cousins are over or whatever, and someone's messing with it, don't touch the guitar. Don't touch it. But then I thought, well, what if actually my son actually pulled it down from the wall and he started playing, and he's like, Dad, how do I play this chord? Or how do I do this? How do I do this? I'd be like, okay, well, you know what? You're not quite ready for it, but you're really passionate about this. I'm going to teach you. So it's like David had so much zeal and passion that he's actually reaching forward into the future and pulling realities back to the old covenant where God actually calls him a man after his own heart. He's actually having worship services, bringing all these people in with him in the presence of God. I mean, just think about that. He's breaking the rules, right? Even to the point of, it actually says, Jesus talks about how David actually took the consecrated bread because he was hungry and he ate it and he gave some to his men. It's like, whoa, you're really breaking the rules. Like you should, I don't know what the rule is if you eat the consecrated bread, but I'm guessing like reading through the Old Testament, it probably wasn't good. I mean, just saying. So David's zeal, actually not only that, he pulled these new covenant realities, but it actually made him part of Jesus' story. See, God actually made his own covenant within a covenant with David, to where David actually becomes part of the line of Jesus. Jesus actually comes through the line of David, all from David's zeal.
I love that. I love how David is able to pull, like Cody said, the realities of the new covenant into he really gets his own covenant because of his passion, because of his zeal. But what on earth does that mean for us? And this is point number 3, is that zeal unlocks kingdom increase. So just like David, he's looking and he's going, I'm stuck in this covenant of blessings and curses where I'm actually not allowed. Like at the time, they did not have the Holy Spirit of God inside of them like we do. Can you imagine? Like, you know those times where you just really need the presence of God and you feel him and you sense him and you sense his love? They didn't have that, you guys. And so David is there. He's stuck in this where it's this whole relationship of rules and laws. And he's going, no, I believe that God is bigger than this. I believe that I can have this relationship. And he is actually then able, because, you know, this 24-hour worship that he sets up in front of the ark, he starts to be able to be in God's presence. He pulls in this reality and he unlocks kingdom increase for his own life. And we can do the same thing. You know, our passion can move God. Do you know that? Our passion can move God. And some of us, we struggle a little bit with that because we're like, no. We still somehow see God as this far off, you know, distant deity who's just doing his own thing. And, you know, we're just going to kind of be like ants over here and like build our own little kingdom and try to like, you know, do what he says and stuff. But the reality is, no, the zeal that we have can actually move God. It did for David. It can actually move God to act. You know, the only thing that God knew of David when he was anointed to be king, the only thing that God knew about David was what he saw out in the field when David was alone or when he was with his family. He was just this kid. That's the only thing he knew, but it moved God. And we can move God. Our passion can move God. And just some more examples of that. Think about the story of Abraham and Lot. I won't get into all the details, but basically Abraham's cousin, I think it was, Lot's Abraham's cousin. He's stuck in a place called Sodom and Gomorrah, really bad place. You know, there's lots of sin. God's like, hey, I'm going to just, you know, burn that place down because it's just not good. There's no one good there. And he tells Abraham this. And Abraham's like, no, God. If there's even like 50 people, will you save it? And what does God do? He ends up responding to Abraham's pleas. He has a plan, and he changes his plan because of Abraham asking. Same thing happens with Moses. There's another time where God's like, hey, these people are nuts. I'm going to just wipe them out and start again. Okay, Moses? And Moses is like, no, God. Let's not do that because remember your promises. And God's like, okay, Moses, fine. So he ends up changing. Then even think about the story of Jesus, the first miracle that Jesus does, turning water into wine. His mom comes to him and is like, hey, son, I need you to do some stuff with the water here. Figure something out. They're in trouble. Okay, can you do something? And what does Jesus say? He says, it's not my time yet, mommy. I'm not going to do it right now, okay? But then the next thing you see, what does he do? He does exactly what she wanted. He helps. He steps in. 1 second he's saying it's not my time. The next second he's doing the miracle. He wasn't going to that wedding that night planning on doing his first miracle, it doesn't seem like from what he says. But then he chooses to do it anyway. Why? Because he looks, everything that Jesus does, he does because he looks at the Father, right? That's what he says. So he obviously in that moment, he's going like, okay, me and my dad, we don't have plans to do a miracle tonight. But then he looks at his Father and his Father says, yeah, do it because your mom has faith, right? Our faith, our zeal can move God. Our zeal can unlock kingdom increase in our own lives. and in our family, in our communities around us, we are in the new covenant, but there are still promises that God has set forth for us, right? Jesus is coming back. There has been a promise of a massive revival that every knee will bow and every tongue confess. And we want to be part of that. And so many of us are sitting back right now going, you know what? Yeah, maybe, but I'm probably not going to be part of it because, I'm just little old me and I don't really have that many gifts and blah, blah, blah. I want to tell you, shut those thoughts up in your mouth, in your head and in your mouth. Honestly, if you will just have zeal for God, you can move him to work in your life, to work in our communities. You guys, if we would just have the passion that David had, if we could have that kind of passion, I believe, and I've said this, and I'm going to keep saying it until it happens, but I believe that we can turn our community upside down if we would all get passionate about our God, if we would get intimate with him. Spend that time in intimacy. Reveal that passion in front of people. Have influence that is positive. Be passionate. Be an example in front of people. And then you will see that kingdom increase in your life. Many of you have probably heard about when Dwight L. Moody was in Dublin in 1873, and he heard this famous quote by Henry Varley. Henry Varley spoke this at a prayer meeting in Dublin, and Henry Varley didn't even remember he said it, but these words that you guys have probably heard before totally dramatically changed the course of Dwight L. Moody's life. He said this: "The world has yet to see what God can do with and for and through and in a man who is fully and wholly consecrated to him. The world has yet to see what God can do." And then Dwight L. Moody said that he had to even remind Varley that he had said that, but those words shaped his life. And it actually says that Moody later said this. He says, as I crossed the wide Atlantic, the boards of the deck were engraved with those words. And when I reached Chicago, the very paving stones seemed marked with them. And Dwight L. Moody has impacted the world and Christianity in so many ways because he believed that he could be that man, right? And all of us need to believe that God wants to do. He is sitting waiting for us to show passion. He is sitting waiting for us to look to him and to trust him and to have faith and to dream big and to believe that we can change our families and our communities and see healing for people who need healing. He is waiting for us to actually believe the words of the Bible, the words that his son spoke, the words that his people wrote down for us, the words of faith that say that we trust our big God.
Okay. You guys there? You awake? Okay, so that whole thing is all about Commitment Sunday. And obviously, Commitment Sunday, we talk about money and stuff. We talk about, what you're willing to contribute during the year. And that's just so we could plan ahead. And we spoke about last week, we're not worried about money. God's got us. He's got us on a track that we're just so blown away by what we see, what we feel God is doing, what God is going to do. So I just invite you to pull out that card and fill it out if you feel led. And you should do no giving, nothing like that out of obligation. So if you're feeling obligated, don't do it. Simple as that. Yeah, and I'm going to say that. I'm going to be brave and say that. But anyways, Jesus is the only way. Jesus is the only hope for our community. And we need to grab hold of that, because sometimes we put our faith in our hope in so many other things. But the hope we have the hope. It's in our hands right here in this little church, and the churches all around the area. We hold the hope. People are lacking hope right now. So I just invite you. This is an invitation. This is not an ask. This is not we're begging you or anything like that. This is an invitation to be part of what God is doing. So go ahead and pull that out if you feel so led. Fill it out. Drop it in the basket here while we're doing worship. And if you're online, you can go ahead and go to our website. It's going to be up on the screen here in a second. Right there, Limitless Church, Thousand Oaks, limitlessgod.church. /give. There you go. And there's a pledge card. So go ahead and do that. Guys, the best thing that you can give over anything is your zeal and your passion for God. That's all he wants from us, is our hearts. He wants your heart. He could do a lot of things with stuff. He could do a lot of things with our time and our abilities, but he wants your heart. Like Tirsha read that quote, can you imagine if every single believer stood up and was passionate and zealous for God and they preached the gospel out in the communities? Can you imagine just releasing the kingdom everywhere they go? Can you imagine how this whole area would change, how this world would change? So I invite you to do that.
And we just want to let you know, if you're here visiting this morning, or if you're online watching and it's your first time, or you're not part of our regular Limitless Church, please do not feel obligated. Again, like Cody said, this is, whatever God puts on your heart. So during this time, we just want to use this as an offering to God. Let me pray for us. God, we just thank you so much for your zeal and your passion for us. That is what it all started with, is the fact that you even had the thought to create us. And then, God, you were so willing to send your son to live and to die and to be raised to life for us. And even now, he is living and looking at us and saying, will you just catch a glimpse of the dreams that I have for you? And so, God, I just pray that you would ignite a zeal, a passion in every single one of us, God. A passion for your word, a passion for you, just for spending time in your presence, God. There is nothing better that we could do with our lives than spending time with you. And God, we want you to ignite that passion for the world and for the community and for our families and for everybody around us who doesn't know you, God. We just desperately want to see them come to know you, because you are so good. And you are so worthy, and you are you're such a good God. And you offer us eternity in paradise with you. Not because we deserve it, but because you are just an extravagant God. We are so excited for the plans that you have for us, God. And Lord, no matter what comes, and no matter what's going on right now, we trust you. God, we do not fall back in fear, but we move forward in faith. We love you. Amen.